Hi, you made it to my channel, Niche Gaming. My gaming channel, it cannot be complete without a Final Fantasy 1 playthrough. This was such a classic. It was a trendsetter RPG. It's one of the games that basically defined what an RPG is. What is a role-playing game and what are the basic elements of a particular role-playing game? I mean, it really set that it created the genre. It started the whole RPG genre, or at least it was definitely one of those games that did that. It's a battle system, party formation and class system, the strategy involved in picking the different parties, which is like one of the biggest parts of this game, one of the biggest attractions to this game. The characters were quite NPC-ish, but they did have some sort of backstory. It was not too much about the different characters. It was really about the story and what the Light Warriors were and their significance and everything. In terms of character development, okay, you don't get that in this first game. You do get it in the second one. We're going to be playing the PSP Remake. It improves the graphics and certain gameplay bugs and flaws. It does make certain things easier, but it tries to make up for it by making certain bosses more difficult or giving them more HP or something like that. Final Fantasy 2, for example, that was released originally in Japan and then finally in America, like with remakes like Dawn of Souls and also the PSP Remake. And that's something else that I'll be playing. Yeah, that features a better plot, that features character development. It features a whole different type of battle system. It had a good concept, but basically it was a flawed battle system. And of course, chocobos were introduced in the Final Fantasy II Japanese one. But in spite of its flaws, that game was clearly progress from this one, but progress from this one. From the first one. This was the original. This was the original Final Fantasy upon which all other Final Fantasies built a sort of a backbone. This is what RPGs are. And as I said before, one of the things that makes people come back to this again and again, this classic game, is a strategy involved in the party selection. It gives it great replay value. It helps you try the effectiveness of one party versus the other. Also, just this party's more fun. Like one party I wanted to try is probably not the best party, but just something I wanted to try, especially in the remake. It's a fighter and white mage and 2 black mages. And really, that's not recommended, but I wanted to try it. I wanted to give it a chance. So you can try different things. You can even try, let's say, a red mage and a white mage and 2 black mages. Should be just enough, but there'll be more struggles because this game does favor brawlers and fighters and fighting. It doesn't give magic enough value, even in spite of the remakes. The remakes did a lot to improve the value of magic. Generally speaking, of course, this game still favors the brawlers over the magic users. I enjoy this aspect of this game so much, and I wanted to do the ultimate authoritative playthrough of this game. So I set up the 3 best, most effective parties, the parties that I think are the most effective, that I had the most fun with. But, you know, there may be some parties I think that are a little more fun than these, but they won't be as effective just because of the way the game works. I picked the 3 most effective parties that I could possibly think of, considering balance, considering everything, and considering the remake. Obviously, maybe 1 or 2 of these parties I wouldn't pick in the original NES version, but definitely in the remake. Considering all the bugs and everything else that the remake resolves, I'll be playing with all 3 of them. Now, you need not worry, I'm going to speed up the most unnecessary parts. Usually 2 times speed works for my games, but only for like less of the battle times or certain parts. I'll just speed up 2 times. So I'll be playing with my most favorite party first. That's my main party, and that's where the story, I'll go through everything. But when it comes to typical battles, non-boss battles, I'll just speed 2 times through those, but also show the ones. And then there are other battles that I just cut out. I'll skip through the most redundant, unnecessary parts. And definitely in the second and third playthroughs, I'll skip through all the story parts and just go straight to the fighting and show you how effective that party is. And that's the whole point of playing through with the second and third parties. Now, that goes out much faster. Majority of the playthrough is going to be with the first main party, the one I like the most. I won't do 1 playthrough all the way and then the other 2. Rather, I will progress with all 3 little by little. Let's say start with Cornelia and then get up to the Pravoka part where you get the ship, but don't start that part. End the video there, and then in the next video, part 2, start from there, start with the ship and everything. And the thing is, it's like you might, okay, isn't that overdoing it? God, how can you play this 3 times through? was just too irresistible for me. I was like, okay, I'm going to do a playthrough, but if I do it with one party, I'll be thinking about, oh man, I could have done it with that party, and that party would have been maybe more effective or whatever. It was just like if something left incomplete. And I had to play with the other two. In my opinion, the other two most effective in addition to the first one. And this first one, the one I liked the most, it was the best one in the NES version as well. This party understands this game and can handle anything the game throws at it. And in the remake, it's not worse. It's just as good or better. And just that some of the other combinations are now effective too because of the remake. And I'll talk about the differences. Each Final Fantasy that I intend to play, I'll pick what I consider to be the best version, the best remake of the particular Final Fantasy. And for Final Fantasy 1, that had to be this PSP version. I've tried the other versions, there are flaws with it. Sometimes they're a little too easy, they didn't have... The PSP version improves the gameplay and the flaws, let's say the MP magic system and many other things, which does help you, and of course it gives you access to items that were never available in the original NES version. But it still adds difficulty in certain ways. So it's not like you just get an easier version, you don't get any of the difficulty that you had in the original NES version. So it'll ramp up the difficulty by making certain enemies stronger than they were in the original NES version. Definitely bosses. It'll make them harder. So you might think coasting through the dungeon and say, oh, this is easier. And then you face the final boss. And it's just many things throughout. It'll improve the enemies. So that's one thing I like. It gave you that difficulty aspect, which has made a lot of the specialized classes more worth playing or more worth picking. The Thief comes to mind, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I consider the graphics, of course, I consider the gameplay, and even originality. Originality/difficulty. What did you face? If the difficulty was because of a bug, then that's not really difficulty, that's annoying. So it took out all the annoying parts of the NES version, but did retain the originality and the same story, the same basic gameplay, but obviously you still have to strategize and everything, but improvements in the gameplay. So it's not like it added things from future Final Fantasies, like the Thief didn't get the steal command. That happens later in future Final Fantasy. It didn't add that much gameplay, obviously, it didn't completely change the game. So that originality is there. But it did improve the graphics, and it did improve serious bugs and flaws in the gameplay that made certain classes not nearly as effective as they should have been. It was like the developers had an idea about those particular classes, but in terms of actual execution, they didn't have time to test it, because if you look at the history of the way Final Fantasy 1 was released, it was kind of like a last-ditch effort for, I think it wasn't Square, Enix, I forgot what the name of the company was at that time. But they were basically it was a last-ditch effort to try to save their company, same the development company. So they really didn't have time to test each and every single aspect, and you can see that in the original NES version bugs. We're not going to go through all that, we're not going to go through that suffering, we're going to go to the PSP version, and that's the best way, in my opinion, to play this original classic. Now, the Final Fantasy 1 PSP made quite a few changes to the original NES version. I'll talk about some of them. I may miss some important changes, but you'll have to forgive me. I did my best to try to look at the main big changes that it made. As I mentioned, it made bosses harder, especially the 4 fiends and the final boss, as well as those kinds of bosses like War Mech. It made certain enemies harder. It gave availability of items that did not exist in the NES version, but do exist in future Final Fantasies. So like ethers and things like that. It made equipment cheaper, and you get money a little faster than the original. So less tedious leveling up. So that's a big improvement. Makes the game more fun, and they try to balance that by making enemies harder, making bosses harder. It improved the target proficiency system, the accuracy stat, which helped the Thief class more than any other. No more empty targeting if one enemy dies. What would happen in the NES version if you attack with another character, or you had set 2 or 3 characters to attack. If the enemy dies after the first or second hit, then the second or third character just swings in midair. So it removed that from it completely. It's not as advanced as some other RPGs where you have an AP system and that sort of thing, and it's not that advanced, but it's still improvement over the swinging in midair. Magic runs on an MP system, so you can choose how many of any spell you want to use, as opposed to the NES version where you had a certain amount of casts per level of spell, and then you couldn't use that level of spell anymore. You'd have to use the next level, and even if you didn't need it, or even if it had no use. intelligence stat was broken in the NES version, so the black mage, white mage spell effectiveness was same as red mage or other classes. So again, it gave you less of a reason to pick white mage and black mage, especially the black mage. But this was fixed in this remake. Huge fix. That and the MP system are the two biggest changes that really made the magic users much better to pick. It reduced the HP of the Monk Master, but he got enough improvements that this downgrade didn't affect him too much. The Thief benefited the most from the remake, and this class is no longer worthless until class change. So what happened is I never picked the Thief in the original NES version because he was just too worthless until class change. You had to wait for him to become a ninja for him to even have any value to the team. He'd suck totally. But because of the accuracy stat improvement, because of the luck stat improvement, agility means more because of evasion, and of course his ability to hit with more hits. So that's one of the reasons, and armor and evasion. So he's worth a lot more before class change. And of course, once he becomes a ninja, there's a complete transformation. And so there's still no steal command, as I mentioned earlier. So it's not that advanced. It's not like they completely changed the gameplay, but they did make the Thief, I guess, what he was originally intended to become by the original developers, but in terms of actual execution, they didn't make it happen. So this fixed all of those logical flaws in the game that existed in the original NES version. Now, let's go into the actual party selection. You get, obviously, 4 characters. One of the things this game teaches you, and that started with the NES version as well, it was all about a well-balanced party. One thing doesn't help you survive all aspects. You'll feel really proud of yourself having, let's say, 4 fighters when there's only giants and ogres and things like that. And you're like, okay, hey, I picked the right party. But then there are parts when you face magi and you face death spells and you face certain enemies that hit you with powerful magic attacks that you just have to take. And also the armor for all 4. You'll miss magic eventually. You'll be missing it for pretty much all of the game, and you won't have any attack magic except the items that you get much later in the game. And that's really for the final dungeons, essentially, is what you get all those items for. They do help you and reduce your magic consumption, but the point is that you get those much later, so you're missing magic throughout the game. You have no AoE magic, and you have no death spell magic, and you have no powerful healing magic. Because they made the bosses harder, the white mage's heal spell and her different levels of heal spells actually can help save you. Because otherwise you're depending on luck, and you're looking to dispatch that boss before he drains all of your HP. And then you have to use all your healing helmets and healing staves to try to keep you casting those to heal yourself enough to keep your people alive. So it's without a white mage, it's very difficult. Well, I'll get to that in a bit. But in terms of party selection, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at all the different advantages and disadvantages of one party over the other. So that's that strategy element that this game teaches you. When you first started, 4 fighters, just spam them. All these other classes, they suck. But even in the original game, what ends up happening is the more specialized parties, they start to show their value as the game progresses. When the game starts, they don't benefit much, and you see that they're more of a burden. So let me first talk about all the different classes. So you have your warrior, you have your thief, monk, red mage, white mage, and black mage. So 6 different classes. You can only pick 4 of them for your party. And basically warrior is a tank. And all of my 3 effective parties had a warrior and they had a red mage. Because in the original game and in the remake, the red mage and the warrior are the most consistently good classes that you get. I don't see any effective party that can go without them. Like I said, you can try something weird like a red mage and a white mage and 2 black mages just because you want like ridiculous amount of magic power, but then you're going to be severely limited against enemies that just hit you. And also your black mage is going to have low HP and there's just a higher chance of them dying, and the white mage will be having a very hard time trying to heal everyone. It might be just enough. I honestly haven't tried that part. It's something I want to try just for fun, right? But in terms of effectiveness, getting a good balance of physical attacks and magic. But warrior is always there. Warrior is a tank, and it's the most consistent class. While the disparities between his effectiveness and that of other classes have decreased since the original version, this is still the most dependable class. If you were going to spam any class in the remake, which wouldn't be worse than trying to do it in the original. In the original NES version, you could get away with 3 warriors and 1 red mage, for example, or 2 warriors and 2 red mages. And the remake, of course, because they improved the other classes and made them more worth picking, because they resolved a lot of the bugs that were never intended to be there, but just lack of testing and everything. So it's not the most effective party, but you could still get away with it because the warrior is that dependable in this game. He is that good, especially once he becomes a knight. Then he even gets access to some entry-level healing. And in terms of the red mage, because of the balance, because of what he is. Basically, if you were going to spam any class in the remake, warrior would still be the safest bet. He's always the most dependable. Dependability is the name of the game with this class. And then we have the thief. The thief is a reasonable damage dealer, and his agility and luck are more effective, so he becomes more effective than obviously the original, and of course his accuracy stat. So he becomes a better addition to any party formation. You had to basically carry him to class change, all your other teams, and he didn't really offer anything in the previous one except luck. Now, I don't know if he had higher accuracy, but it didn't really help. He has significantly greater accuracy. And what accuracy affects is the number of hits you do. So if you have a sword that's slightly underpowered compared to the warrior, but you hit with 2 more hits, so 3 more hits than the fighter. The fighter is hitting 3 hits and you're hitting 6 with the thief. The thief has a good chance of doing more damage. It just depends on the enemy. Certain enemies have higher armor and defense, so the warrior's higher weapon or stronger weapon is going to do more damage. So essentially, the agility and luck and accuracy have all improved and are worth more in its remake. So that's one of the reasons why he becomes a better addition to the party. Agility and luck both affect who hits first, the chance of a preemptive strike, so that's you attacking before the enemies are able to attack. All 4 of your party members get 1 full attack before the enemy even gets a chance to attack you. And then evasion, them missing you. Initially, when you're facing like wolves and other things like that in the early part of the game, since you're just starting out, they have high evasion, they have high agility. So you miss a lot with them. Or if you have 2 hits, then you end up getting 1 of those hits and not the full 2 hits. They're highly agile. Later, when you become agile or highly agile, then things start missing you. So with a thief, because he has the highest agility in the game, that actually means something. What it was broken in the NES version, I don't know, but it just gives him more value. And especially when he becomes a ninja, he still retains all that agility. Plus, he gets access to higher, stronger armor and everything. And of course, it's a complete transformation. It was a complete transformation in the NES version, and this is still a transformation. He still gets all the benefits of the thief, plus he now has armor. He has access to a lot of the knight type armor or warrior type armor that no one else could get. So it's the only 2 classes, the warrior and the thief, or eventually the ninja. Warrior, ninja, and knight, you could say, are the only ones who have access to heavy armor in this game. Everyone else wears mostly medium to light armor, rings and everything else, and leather armors. They don't wear heavy armor. Red Mage has a couple of things that he can wear heavy armor, but eventually he doesn't have access to the heavy armors later in the game. So these are your 3 classes. So if you want to have 2 that have strong armor, well, warrior and thief would be. Now, why would you pick a thief over the warrior? Like, as I said, because of the remake, because all those stats are not broken anymore, and because the accuracy gets such a boost, he has such high accuracy, he's actually a good damage dealer, plus he gives you the other benefits. Agility, luck, and then of course his ninja transformation, he gets access to low-level black magic. It's much, much better to pick him in the second. Still, the warrior is just by far the best. He's more dependable, but the thief gives you lots of advantages, and they make him worthwhile picking. That didn't happen in the NES version. I would never pick the thief. He was too worthless. I hated him. I hated that class. People may disagree, but I hated that class. It was just too much suffering to wait till class changed and when he became a ninja and finally added some value to the team. Before that, he was pretty much totally useless and worthless. And then we get to the monk. The monk gets strength upgrades throughout. Initially starts out with more strength than the warrior, but he gets pretty much the same amount of strength or maybe a little less, but his upgrades, these happen throughout, and these are more important for him than for weapon wielders. Because for weapon wielders, since they're not barehanding, they're depending upon the strength plus really the weapon's power to do damage. So for example, the warrior would be. His strength, and because he hits 2 hits when he starts out, like when you unarm him and he uses his fists, he used 2 hits to start out for the same amount of accuracy. So 32 accuracy, or up until the 32 accuracy mark, the warrior and the monk. Warrior will be doing 1 hit, and if you unequip the monk, he'll be doing 2 hits. And the higher the strength, the higher each of those 2 hits are going to be in terms of penetrating the enemy's armor. At even early levels before class change, not only does he compete with the warrior for damage dealing, he surpasses him. So it doesn't take much later into the game or something. No, it's like level 8 or something, and he's pretty much already not just competing, but starting to overpass the warrior against certain enemies. Enemies with the highest armor are the ones where the warrior and knight will be keeping up. And at later levels, it doesn't matter what kind of enemy is, the monk will, or the master at that point after class change, he just starts to pull away. He starts to pull away in physical damage dealing, and in fact, he becomes such a beast that against any boss, your best bet is just to give him a temper and a haste. You don't even need the haste, just keep giving the temper spell. And what that does, it increases the attack power of each attack. So he has 8 hits, for example, or 10 hits. And each one of those, you just get the attack to be higher and higher and higher. And then if you add a haste, it doubles the amount of attacks. So it goes from 8 hits to 16 hits. And all of them at ridiculous amounts. So it's the temper stack, in fact. And that's just one way to dispatch any boss, even the final boss. Just keep him alive long enough to do that, and boom, boom, he just brawls them to death, all of them. No other party or class is that effective against bosses, because bosses don't really get hit by magic attacks as much. Those are better for AoE and dispatching large amount of, let's say, undead, for example, or large amount of enemies at a time. But when it comes to one individual, especially a boss or one of the fiends or the final boss, there is no one better. There is no class better for dispatching. As he levels, he even sheds armor and later only starts wearing it again because of the death protection. So you'll need the pro rings and other things like that. If it weren't for the death protection, I wouldn't even equip him. He'd be totally unequipped, unarmored, just his skin, his armor, and his bare fists, his weapons. He is the most resistant to status effects. Now, this may be debatable and maybe even disputable, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. My experience has been, there's a luck factor here, of course, but when it comes to status effects, I've noticed that if everyone's getting poisoned, or if everyone's put to sleep, or if everyone's being turned to stone, he's one of the last ones to be doing. Generally speaking. Now, it can happen. Sometimes he can be turned to stone, not one else, but usually he's the last one to succumb to any kind of status effects. But death protection you really need for everyone, so I wouldn't take off the pro rings. It just helps you against death spells. And death spells become more common as you get to the later parts of the game. So the red mage is essentially your jack of all trades and master of none. This is, in some way or another, it is replicated in other Final Fantasies. In Final Fantasy II, you have one character, he's kind of in the middle, but they don't talk about him being a red mage. That class is not seen again very often throughout the Final Fantasies, but it's alluded to in certain ways, or certain classes are based on their stats, and the character in the RPG, his role, acts as kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. But you don't see this very often in the Final Fantasy, but it started here, the red mage. He can fight like the fighting classes, but not as well. And after class change, other specialized classes start pulling away in terms of damage and just access to higher level armor and everything else. He has a second highest agility in the game and good accuracy. He can use magic like the mage classes, but has less of the intelligence stat. Accesses spells later. Never gets access to certain spells regardless of level or class change. And he has less MP. Now, one of the reasons why he was so powerful and so much overpowered over, let's say, the white mage and the black mage, why you could spam 4 red magi, or have 2 fighters and 2 red mages and have an effective party, or 3 fighters and 1 red mage and get away with it, because there was no intelligence stat. That intelligence stat was broken. So the red mage's fire 2 would be the same as the black mage's fire 2. So why are you going to pick the black mage? Except the black mage would get access to certain spells, but it was just too much suffering to go through with the black mage that you'd never pick him. Well, I would never pick him in the original NES version. He just wasn't worth it. He wasn't worth the trouble. Same thing with the thief. He wasn't worth it, because the intelligence stat was broken. It's not like they didn't intend for the black mage to be an effective class, but because of the bugs, he just wasn't. The red mage, when the other parties get class change, they benefit significantly, while for the red mage and warrior, it's just more of the same. And it is true that the red mage does start to transition into mediocrity as you progress through the game, but one thing to keep in mind, because of the way this game is and because of the progress to get to higher levels is a journey in and of itself. It's not that the red mage becomes worthless at the end. No, he's never worthless. Him and the warrior are the most consistent classes, and they're good at the start and they're good at the end. And in the case of the warrior, he's excellent at what he does to be the tank of the party. So the intelligence stat being boosted, that gives you more reason to pick the white mage than black mage. But it's not like the red mage is worthless in the remake. He's still good. He's always good. Then you have the white mage. The white mage's heal spell, her Dia spell, which attacks the undead, and other spells, plus the fact that she gets more HP than anyone except the warrior. And that, I think, is not, I don't agree with that, but that's the way this game works. One thing I noticed, one change from the NES version is the monk used to get more HP than anyone except the warrior. And he would, in fact, compete with the warrior at later levels, especially once he became a master. But unfortunately, what I've noticed here is the warrior, he still pulls far away in terms of HP. He always has the highest HP. But after him, it's actually the white mage, which is a little surprising. I thought in all Final Fantasy, it's pretty much always the monk. But they did degrade his HP gain, and he's like the third or fourth even sometimes. And that's not good. That's one thing that's known for all the monks and this type of bare fisting, that type of class. They're always have the highest HP, they always have high strength and agility and vitality. But they always go unarmed, they always wear less armor. That's one of the reasons why they have high agility and be able to, so that's what they're known for. But unfortunately in this one, and especially in the remake, they kind of degraded his HP gain for some reason, which makes the white mage the second highest HP gainer. And it makes her one of the most effective classes. Her life spell, she gets right away, obviously pretty early in the game. And you do have Phoenix Downs in this, so that's a big thing. You didn't have that in the NES version. So the only one that could bring anyone back to life is either take them back to the city, where there's a church where they can go and be revived, or the white mage's life spell. And eventually she gets a life 2 spell, which is much, much later in the game, near the end of the game, where she can just bring someone back to life with full HP. But her life spell, life 2 spell, and heal spells make her vital in any boss fight, especially against the 4 fiends, the final boss, and of course War Mech. Going without the white mage is leaving things to chance. Any party that doesn't have a white mage is just leaving things to chance. You will get lucky at certain times just to survive. Whereas taking the white mage in an effective arrangement, and as long as you don't do anything too reckless in your playthrough, you will always survive. She also benefits from the intelligence stat obviously not being broken in the remake, so her cure spell will be a lot more powerful than the red mage's cure spell. But the red mage doesn't get the heal spell. That's only for the white mage. And of course, you expect that as she levels up her intelligence, the same heal spell will end up giving more healing per character. So if the heal spell was doing 20 healing at the beginning of the game, then later it's going to do 40 per character, later 50. And then heal 2 is going to do more than that, and heal 3 is going to do even more than that. And of course, she later gets spells like the Holy Spell, which is an actually attacking spell, non-elemental. Not as effective as the Black Mage's nuke attack, but still very powerful and very effective. And it makes her good throughout the game and vital. Like I said, there's just so many things that are surprising you. Sometimes you can get ambushed. They launch magic attacks, Ice 2, Fire 2, or they paralyze you, you hit by undead. She has weapons to take care of everyone. She is the proper healer, and you're just leaving things to chance. You could work hard and then just still lose your entire game because you didn't have a white mage. So you do depend a little bit on luck when you face, and especially against the final bosses, because when you face the final boss, he's much more powerful in this remake, and he hits you with a ridiculous amount of large AoE attacks where all of your guys are taking 500 damage and large amounts of damage. And with a couple of those spells, if you don't have powerful healing, the alternative is then you have like one guy attacking and the other 3 are just using healing helmets and healing staffs just to keep you alive. And even then it's difficult. So you are leaving things to chance, especially with the final boss, when you don't take a white mage. You are trying to bank a little bit on luck just to survive the final battle without a white mage. I do pick one party that goes without a white mage, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's definitely not my best party because of that element, because of that luck element. You're depending on luck. Yes, that party is very effective because of most of the game, but when you get to some of those boss fights, then you're like, man, I wish I had a white mage. Then finally we have the black mage. And thanks to the remake, this class is effective. The black mage has the highest intelligence, obviously, the most effective mass damage dealer, AoE, and death spell dealer, especially since the intelligence stat is not broken in the remake. He gets access to higher level spells at earlier levels than, let's say, the red mage, so he'll get fire 3 before the red mage does, the same level. He gets the most MP in the game. That means the most, because all he can do is magic. His attacks don't get good until class change. As I mentioned, he has the highest intelligence stat, so his fire spell is so far more effective than the red mage. Let's say if a red mage hits a fire spell against a creep, is one of the enemies you face, and he's weak to fire. So if the red mage hits him, he gets like 30 damage. And he has like 55 or 50 plus HP, so he doesn't die from it. Whereas if the black mage hits him with a fire, gives like 55, 60, 62 damage, and it kills him right away. So his attacks will be like doubly effective against anything. So his fire 2 will be twice as more powerful, or eventually even more than that, because the intelligence kept increasing. Whereas the red mage gets a nice balance of stats. Sometimes strength, sometimes agility, sometimes vitality, sometimes luck, sometimes intelligence. They made it the right way in the remake. That's what they should be. The black mage specializes in magic. And because of his highest intelligence, nothing is more effective. He gets the most MP, of course, because he's all about magic. So it's all about attack magic. And he does have the least HP in the game. And throughout, you're always aching to just trying to get him to a higher level just so he doesn't get killed with one hit or with one magic attack. He has always the lowest HP, and in the game you always make sure to try to heal him in a timely manner. Even extra heal him, waste a little cure heals. So even if, let's say, he has only 15 HP to gain, but he has such low HP you're afraid of him dying, the healing spell will give you like 50 or 30 or 40. Doesn't matter, just waste it. Make sure he gets up to his highest HP, so take the least chance of him dying. So essentially with the warrior, you get strength, vitality. Vitality is usually the highest with the warrior, which is not exactly the right way it should be. Vitality determines your HP. Should be the monk with the highest vitality and perhaps even the highest strength. But the monk gets the highest or close to the highest strength. He does get a decent amount of agility, and vitality is pretty high. And he has the lowest intelligence. The monk is the only one, even after class change, he never gets to use magic. Okay, which is fine. That's consistent with all the Final Fantasies. Just beat things up. He's a brawler. He's a fighter. He can wield magic exuding items. But anyone can do that. Any class can do that. But he has the least amount of intelligence. Now, one good thing, because of the intelligence stat is not broken, if a monk, for example, has the lowest intelligence, if they use a healing helmet, it's not going to be the same as, let's say, if a white mage or black mage uses a healing helmet. Because even your item cast will be dependent upon because you're casting that spell through the power of the item. You're casting the spell using the intelligence of the person. It does depend on the intelligence of the one using the item. His intelligence being lowest or one of the lowest, it does affect even his healing item casts. The white mage, as I mentioned, vitality is very high, almost as high as the warrior. And then, of course, her intelligence is high up there. You're not going to get too much any other stats with the white mage. She does use a hammer, and so she can get some good hits every now and then in terms of physical attacks. Black mage, really you're just depending on daggers throughout early part of the game, and later after class change he gets the cat claws, which are a very good weapon for him and pretty much the highest level weapon until you get to the final dungeon, or one of the final dungeons. So black mage, or black wizard as he becomes, obviously he's going to have the lowest amount of HP, the lowest strength. The black mage is not a physical fighter. You don't depend on him for physical fighting until, like I said, much later in the game. And even then you have such powerful magic that unless you just don't want to waste that MP for no good reason, then you might use physical attacks. So you're trying to conserve your MP. But you get so much ethers and things like that you didn't have in the first game that you have more than enough MP to keep casting magic. The red mage, like, has a good balance of everything. He does have high agility, he does have certain things, but he has good balance of everything. He does get strength, he does get agility, he does get intelligence, he does get vitality. It's pretty much even throughout the game. The monk, like I mentioned, strength and vitality, and black mage, pure intelligence. That's what he's all about. He does get the higher luck than some of the others, and he gets a decent amount of agility. I think he's second or third, probably third in agility. And the thief, of course, is all about agility, luck. Agility and luck are his main things. He does get a decent amount of strength. but he's not high up there. I think he might be third or fourth in terms of strength. Later, when he becomes a ninja, he starts getting a little more strength, but still his main thing is all about agility, luck, and accuracy. Just getting more amount of hits with as much strength or the best weapon you can find. Getting to class change. That's when all your classes get like an upgrade and get access to better weapons, better armor, and better spells. Spells that they didn't have access to as a, let's say, black mage versus black wizard. Red mage versus red wizard. Red mage doesn't get access to the life spell. I think you have to become a red wizard first. All of your classes benefit from class change, but some more than others, and some don't benefit almost at all. But getting to class change is around 40 to 50% of the game. So picking a party that is terrible and highly dependent upon class change to be effective is not going to give you a good playing experience for the first half of the game. So let's say if you were to pick 4 thieves, I mean, that would just be suffering. The thief is a specialized class, does give you benefits, especially in the remake, but to pick him and no one else, that would be just plain stupid. The thief doesn't give you nearly enough of the benefits that it's worth it to pick him for more than one character. So one of the only characters, and him and the monk, I would never pick 2 of them. It's not nearly effective enough to have 2 of them. They give you more of the disadvantages and of course the progress to the game, getting to class change, and of course all of the other disadvantages of the classes. The benefits that they give you are not enough to suffer through that. Even 2 black mages, again, getting to class change or just getting them to higher enough levels they can stay alive long enough. And of course not having anyone to take the hard hits, because your first 2 rows, they take the majority of the hits. They take like 50%, I think, your first and second rows. So it doesn't matter who you put in the first 2 rows. It should be a fighting class, someone that has high HP, can take hits, warrior, thief who eventually becomes a ninja, red mage, starts out with high access to decent amount of armor. Not exactly to the point of the warrior, but still pretty good armor and can take a lot of hits. So the red mage is pretty much second in defense up until class change. After class change, it becomes a ninja, when a thief becomes a ninja. So class change is important for most classes, but for some far more than the others. The monk benefits the least from class change, but the most from leveling up. The warrior is always awesome, and the gap between him and the other specialized classes in terms of value to the team decreases after each level, and the most after class change. Benefiting from class change in descending order. So if we look at who benefits the most and then who benefits the least, start with the thief. The thief has a complete transformation because of class change. Then the black mage. Black mage, when he becomes a black wizard, he has access to ridiculously powerful spells. And of course he gets access to armor and some weapons. Just makes him a lot more effective. And then white mage. And then red mage. After class change, again, they have access to a lot more spells and a lot more weapons and armor that they didn't have access to prior to class change. And then warrior. Warrior does become a knight and then gets access to a lower level white magic. And of course, the thief becomes ninja. Not only does he have access to all the armor, he also gets access to lower level black magic. I think up until level 4, even ice 2, which is a mass damage spell that hits all of the enemies with ice elemental attack. And the monk, of course, he benefits the least. He really doesn't get anything from class change. Just he gets a new sprite. He becomes a master. In the old game, I remember the master used to get more HP than the monk. So the sooner you got to class change, the higher your HP upgrades would be, your vitality would be. But I don't notice that. I think maybe he gets higher strength stats, but I didn't really calculate it properly, so I can't tell. So I don't think he doesn't get anything from class change. He does, but he gets the least from class change. Now, in terms of benefiting from leveling up in descending order, starting with the one who benefits the most, I'm gonna have to say the monk. Monk benefits the most from leveling up because of his unarmed stuff, and of course he gets strength, and because of the higher amount of hits, he always will have the highest amount of hits out of anyone, even the thief. So if the thief is hitting 6 hits, he'll probably be hitting 8 hits. So the fact that he gets strength upgrades, each one of those strength upgrades affects each one of those hits against all of your enemies. So it just gets more and more powerful as you level up. His HP gets harder, and then of course his unarmed armor increases as well. His defense, his kind of natural defense. He's the only class that gets that. So higher his level, the higher his armor. And we just get stronger and stronger after every level. He gains the most, in my opinion, from leveling up. After him, of course, the black mage, white mage, and red mage. You got to give it to the wizards because they depend on MP. And with a black mage who's most dependent on MP, he doesn't really have much to attack with in terms of physical attacks, and he can't take that many hits because he has the lowest amount of HP, always the lowest amount of defense along with the white mage. They have access to pretty much the same type of armor early in the game. They can't take many hits, and with the black mage, it's a higher chance for him to die. So the more magic he has, and he's able to hit enemies, and the more intelligence, because of he just depends more on levels. The higher his level, the higher his MP, the higher his intelligence, the more effectively he can dispatch enemies before they can tear him a new one. So black mage, and of course then the white mage, same basic concept. Red mage, he benefits less from leveling up in class change because he's less dependent on magic. He can be hitting and be a brawler throughout the game as well. And that's why he doesn't benefit as much as him. So they're more desperate to get to the higher levels. They're more desperate to get to class change, or you want to get to class change as soon as possible for all of these types of classes. In terms of leveling up, the thief still benefits more than the warrior. They both don't get as much from leveling up. The thief does get his higher accuracy upgrade, so he benefits the most in accuracy, and that means he just gets the most hits with a weapon out of the weapon wielders. Obviously the monk will get the most amount of hits, even though his accuracy doesn't rise as fast as the thief's rises. The thief, of course, higher the agility, gets more and more evasion. He does get benefit from leveling up like all characters do and classes do. The warrior is most effective by your equipment, and so whenever leveling up is not the big thing for warrior especially, thief, they'll depend on more the equipment that they can access, and of course class change for the thief, so he can become a ninja as soon as possible. As I mentioned, spamming 4 fighters or 3 plus fighters plus a red mage is not as effective in the remake because of them being prone to status effects, the money required, superior damage from thief and monk in many circumstances, improvement of the value of magic, and of course the other benefits that thief brings along, like luck. So you can pick your fights, you can run from battles easier with the thief. Those advantages the warrior does not offer. And as I mentioned, the status effect, the monk is the best for resisting status effects, him and the white mage. The improvement of the value of magic. Now the magic users have the intelligence stat fixed because of the MP system versus the NES magic system. The NES magic system, as I mentioned earlier, was where you just had a certain amount of cast per level. So you didn't get to pick and choose what magic you're going to use. You end up just using whatever. That system, and then the list goes on. There's so many other reasons why those 4 fighters or 3 fighters plus red mage are going to end up making the game a lot more boring, and in certain cases not nearly as effective, and maybe even get you in trouble because again you don't have a white mage for those powerful magic attacks. HP is always limited of all of your characters. Eventually, after taking enough hits, after taking enough powerful magic attacks, your fighter will fall. No one's HP is unlimited. He'll be the last to fall, but eventually he will fall. And of course, there are death attacks. And the fighter not being as resistant to status effects as, let's say, the monk, there is a better chance that he would get hit first and then die. And there are many enemies throughout Final Fantasy I that will just hit you and you fall dead because of death attacks or death magic spells. Sometimes it's just 2 double hit, boom, you're dead. Because that's their power. That's their special attack. And until you get the pro ring and other death protection items, you're prone. And once you do revive the warrior, then you have to heal his HP all the way back up for him to be the effective party member. Now let's get to I'm going to save my favorite for the last. Just want to show you one of my favorites, and that is the warrior, thief, monk, and red mage. It lacks the all-important white mage. As I mentioned, you are depending a little bit on luck, but I ended up completing the final boss at an earlier level. And it's also in part because I was just tired of leveling up, because it does get boring when you just have fighters. But through the progression of this game, the earlier progression up until class change, is just so much easier because leveling up is so easy. All of your guys are fighters. So it's all pure fighting class, but with some balance. It's not like you're just picking 4 fighters. So instead of 4 fighters, what you would do is use a party like this. Get a warrior, thief, and monk, and red mage for all the reasons I explained. You get a good balance of everything. You get the thief who can still help you pick fights, who can still give you access to, let's say, different weapons or use up different weapons. He's a lot cheaper than the warrior, especially early in the game. And also, he will eventually become the ninja. He'll eventually get access to lower level black magic. And the warrior will become a knight and will get access to lower level white magic. Also, he'll have the higher accuracy stats, so certain points in the game, he'll even start competing with the warrior for the amount of damage. And once he becomes a ninja, definitely, he's up there in terms of damage. competing with the warrior and the monk. But the monk eventually pulls away from everyone. He's still the best bet in terms of doing heavy damage to the bosses and dispatching them quickly. The monk, of course, the cheapest class in the game. You really don't have to buy him much. The thief usually picks up the weapons that the warrior and the red mage aren't using. The red mage can fight. Red mage has good defense up until about class change. So the red mage is good about carrying you through to class change. You have the warrior plus the red mage who have high defense. The thief will also help carry you through with getting you more preemptive strikes. And as his agility gets higher and higher and his luck gets higher and higher, you see more and more preemptive strikes. You see less chance of the ambushes. That doesn't mean you do get zero. You do still get ambushed every now and then, but it's much less chance. So he helps you survive in that way. And because a lot of those stats are not broken in the remake, they actually work. And the thief works the way he's supposed to work. He helps the team the way he's supposed to help the team. Now, he doesn't lose those stats once he becomes a ninja. He just becomes everything that the thief wasn't. He starts accessing that heavy armor. So he becomes your second. And then you have the red mage and the monk. They all pretty much can take hits. There's no one on here that doesn't have enough HP or armor to take hits. At least in the first half of the game, and then definitely in the second half. Everyone can take hits. Everyone has HP enough. Everyone can fight. It's a hard party to bring down. But you do lack, of course, the white mage. But still, after leveling up, and leveling up is easier because you have 4 characters that can fight. You don't have to wait for magic. You don't have to protect the black mage or other weaker characters. All of your characters are strong, can handle themselves because they're all of them brawlers. This party wasn't as effective in the NES version. I wouldn't pick it as one of my most effective parties, but even in the NES version, this party worked. Because you had the red mage and the warrior to carry your thief and monk through to class change, and once you get to class change, of course, you got the ninja, and your monk is, as I said, still good. He's pretty much consistent from the NES version to the remake. In fact, if anything, they made certain things better or easier about him, certain things worse. Even the NES version, this was a good one, but it wouldn't be my favorite or top most effective. Pick it as something interesting to try out. But in this one, in the remake, definitely. Because of all the improvements, because of bug fixes, this is one of the best parties to play with. Another good one, warrior, red mage, white mage, and black mage. When you get tired of just the brawling and you're like, oh man, I want something more. I want to be able to use magic more. And because intelligence is not broken in this version, man, I want to take advantage of that. I would never consider this best for the NES version for the same reasons. Because of all the things that were broken or buggy. In the remake, because they fixed the intelligence stat and so much more, this is one of the most dominant and fun to play with parties in the game. They excel against the undead, so you can find strong undead and use them to level up. You can just go back and forth to the part that re-engages you with those particular undead and just keep launching fire 2s, keep launching Dia 2s, fire 3s perhaps, whatever's necessary. Fires, attacks, you still got enough attacks with the attacking power with your warrior and red mage. And you got your powerful spells with the white mage and black mage. You just keep leveling up. Leveling up becomes easier, getting gold gets much easier once you are able to find a strong bunch of undead and just keep attacking them. You can even fight other groups of enemies that you can dispatch quickly, but undead are definitely one option, and they are more powerful against the undead than pretty much any combination you could go with. The funness aspect, because magic is more fun than just brawling and holding your button down and just button mashing and waiting for them to hit attack and attacking everyone. Distributing attacks, that's pretty much the only strategy you have. You have this guy against this guy, these two against this one to dispatch them, and then take a third one against someone. That's really all the strategy you have with fighting. But with magic, it's a little bit more, and it's cool. It's fun to play with magic. So the fun to play with aspect, this is one of my favorite parties. However, my favorite party, both in the NES version and in the remake, is this right here. The warrior, monk, red mage, and white mage. This party pretty much has no weaknesses. You might think that it doesn't have enough black magic, but since this game favors fighters, and later you even get spell casting items, you'll find that the red mage's attack magic is more than enough. But you're still depending more on just straight up brawling. And of course you have the white mage to heal you. You have more than enough. It has amazing healing. It has good defense and armor. It starts out with the red mage obviously providing the secondary armor or defense. Warrior obviously taking the main big hits because he's your tank. Then eventually, as you improve the monk, his level increases. He starts to get to the point where he's taking a lot of hits and he can handle it, and he doesn't even need armor. And then the only time you eventually start equipping armor is when you get to the later parts of the game. You get the Pro Ring and other death spell protection rings. That's the only reason why you would even equip him with any armor. But the point is that the monk will start taking a decent amount of hits and he gets higher armor just because of his class. And he's not like the highest, or he's not as much as the ninja, for example, but he'll still take like the third most defense and armor. For the first half of the game, the red mage is taking the second most hits after the warrior. And then later it's the monk. And this has one of the highest HPs. One of the things about armor and defense is not only about how strong your defense rating or armor rating is. This has 3 of the characters that have the highest HP: warrior, monk, and white mage. High HP party. And then of course you have the white mage with ridiculously powerful healing spells to keep everyone alive. And you could decide with your red mage, do I need more brawling in this part, or do you want to save my magic for my MP for fire 3 or opportune fire 3 or fire 2? What do I need? Do I need more magic here, or do I need more fighting? So he can use his spells to just heal and give that extra amount of healing and help the white mage out. And in addition to that, we have potions and everything else. High HP, powerful fighting. Monk, always the most powerful fighter. Dispatching bosses is his specialty. Dispatching individual opponents that have high HP, that's his specialty. Especially with support from a red mage, like let's say you can give him a temper or a haste, or temper one turn and haste the next turn. He'll dispatch bosses like this. Has just enough black magic to get you through the game. With this party, there's never a time when you feel you're struggling or in trouble. It can handle anything the game throws at. From start to finish, you're a dominant party. And you can just walk around and do whatever you want. Leveling up is easy. There's nothing that the game throws at you. In terms of money spent, it's nice and balanced. The monk helps you because he doesn't cost anything. He's the cheapest character in the game. You don't have to buy him spells. You don't have to buy him armor. He's a money saver. That may not be as important as it was in the NES version because they made a lot of things cheaper and items cheaper and accessible items. But he's still the cheapest character. So everything's nice and balanced. Things are not too expensive. You end up leveling up in dungeons because I could get away with that. It's so much extra healing. And there's nothing that I'm afraid of. Anything that comes along my way, I can handle it. My party's so well balanced and it can handle everything the game throws at you. It's like no one ever dies. And if they do, I've got 2 characters who can do the life spell and one of them who has a life 2 spell. And she has the powerful healing spell. This is the best party. Now, you guys might disagree. I understand if you play this remake or another remake, and other remakes do have different gameplay aspects and everything. So I can't speak to all those other games. I've tried a little bit of the Dawn of Souls, but I didn't enjoy it. I thought that this remake took the best parts of the original and turned it into the best way to play Final Fantasy 1. And that's what you should do with the party formation, is really understand. Now, there are other interesting party formations, like I wanted to try this. One of the lack of effectiveness of this party is you just don't get enough fighting. So if you want to go crazy, but the red mage is not ideal to take the hard hits from ogres and giants. And of course, the first row takes the most amount of hits, so he'll be spammed with attacks, and he doesn't have the highest HP. So this definitely has weaknesses. If you're going to go crazy and just get full amount of magic, have a bunch of mages, you could try this party and have no warrior. This is for fun. You can try other things for fun. Maybe you could try various combinations. I'd like to hear what you guys think and what you guys think of the best party. Let's move into the actual game. I think that this is the best party. I think this is the best arrangement that you could ever have. And definitely the party I would always go with. This is the safest party. So without further ado, let's get into the game. Let's actually get started. I showed you the FMV earlier, but now we're going to get into the in-game intro that you certainly didn't have the NES version. So one of the big improvements of this PSP version. Well, that's it for my playthroughs. This one had to be long because of almost like an hour of a party selection, classes guide, that whole intro of Final Fantasy 1, the NES version versus the PSP version. That's why this one had to be long. But going forward, obviously, it's going to be some shorter videos. I did my best to edit them and speed through some of the monotonous parts and battles and redundant parts and the least important parts. I tried to skip through a lot of the battles, the ones I wanted to show. Obviously, I did on 2x speed. This is the way I'm going to play through all of it. I'm going to do all 3 parties little by little. Let's say in this one, up until from Cornelia, just getting to Pravoka, the second town that you have access to. So we'll start that in the next episode. If you like my playthrough, if you like my channel, please give me a like, subscribe, and share, please. Thank you. Thanks for watching.